At 3:47 a.m., the silence shattered. Not from explosions or roaring jets, but from something far more terrifying. The absence of everything Russia thought protected them. In less than 12 minutes, Tu-20 Ukrainian drones turned Moscow's most sophisticated radar network into blind metal. And what happened next proved that in modern warfare, the greatest weapon isn't always the loudest one. It's the one they never see coming. October 15, 2024. The Kaluga region sleeps under a blanket of autumn fog. Streetlights flicker through mist so thick it swallows headlights at 20 meters. Russian radar operators settle into their night shifts, confident in the electronic dome that shields their airspace. 37 Pantsir S-1 systems guard the perimeter. 12 S-400 Triumph batteries scan the horizon with sensors so advanced they can track a Sparrow at 40 kilometers. And overhead, the crown jewel of Russian air defense, an A-50 mainstay aircraft circles at 31,000 feet. Its massive radar array spinning like a mechanical eye that never blinks. To the men watching those screens, the night feels routine. Coffee grows cold beside glowing monitors. Radio chatter flows in familiar patterns. Weather reports promise clearing skies by dawn. Nobody notices the faint electromagnetic whisper threading through the static, a signal so subtle it might have been cosmic radiation. But that whisper carries a message 23 days in the making, a countdown measured not in seconds, but in heartbeats. And at exactly 3:47 a.m., those heartbeats stop. The first wave doesn't announce itself. 47 reconnaissance drones, each smaller than a briefcase, slip across the border at altitudes barely above the tree line. Their engines hum no louder than electric bicycles. Their radar cross-sections register smaller than migrating birds. To every sensor scanning the night, they appear as nothing more than atmospheric noise. But these machines aren't scouts. They're digital ghosts, each one carrying a payload more dangerous than any warhead. Electronic warfare suites designed to learn, adapt, and remember every frequency, every pulse pattern, every defensive rhythm Russia broadcasts into the darkness. For 11 minutes, they drift through the electronic landscape like silent cartographers mapping an invisible continent. Every radar sweep that touches them gets cataloged. Every communication burst between air defense units becomes data. Every automated response protocol gets recorded and analyzed by artificial intelligence that never sleeps, never hesitates, and never forgets. The Russian operators see nothing unusual. Their screens remain clean. Their coffee stays warm. Their confidence grows with each passing minute of apparent calm. Then the learning phase ends. At 3:58 a.m., the reconnaissance drones transmit their findings in a burst lasting exactly 0.3 seconds. A data package containing the complete electronic fingerprint of Russia's most secure airspace rockets skyward to a constellation of Ukrainian satellites, which relay it instantly to ground stations where supercomputers begin crafting the perfect counter-response. Within 47 seconds, every frequency, every timing pattern, every defensive weakness has been weaponized into code. The second wave launches at 4:02 a.m. Not from the Ukrainian border, but from concealed positions already deep inside Russian territory. Positions established by special operations teams who crossed weeks earlier, moving like shadows through forests and farmland, carrying equipment disguised as agricultural sensors and weather monitoring stations. 173 attack drones rise from hidden launch tubes scattered across a 400-square-kilometer grid. Their coordination is perfect, their timing is surgical, their purpose is absolute. But these aren't ordinary attack drones either. Each one carries a specialized electronic warfare package tuned to the exact specifications gathered by the reconnaissance wave, jamming frequencies calibrated to blind specific radar types, spoofing algorithms designed to create false targets exactly where Russian operators expect to see real threats. Signal generators that can mimic everything from cargo aircraft to ballistic missiles, flooding defensive networks with so much false data that truth becomes impossible to distinguish from deception. The Russian air defense network reacts exactly as designed. S-400 batteries swivel toward incoming contacts. Pantsir systems lock onto targets and begin engagement sequences. Fighter jets scramble from 3 different air bases. Orders flow through communication channels as commanders coordinate responses to what appears to be a massive Ukrainian assault. Every defensive system activates simultaneously, filling the electromagnetic spectrum with so much energy that the night sky becomes a storm of invisible lightning. And that's exactly what Ukraine was waiting for. The moment Russian radars switch from passive scanning to active tracking, they become beacons broadcasting their exact locations, frequencies, and operational patterns. The attack drones don't need to hunt for targets anymore. The targets are announcing themselves, screaming their positions into the darkness with every pulse of energy they emit. Ukraine's electronic warfare systems lock onto these signals like heat-seeking missiles following exhaust trails. What happens next unfolds with the precision of a symphony conducted by mathematics. The first Panzer battery dies at 4:07 a.m. when 3 drones converge on its position simultaneously. Not from one direction, but from 3 different angles, their approach vectors calculated to arrive within milliseconds of each other. The system's automated guns swivel frantically, trying to engage multiple fast-moving targets that seem to dance around their firing solutions like smoke around a candle flame. The battery manages to destroy 2 drones before the third slips through its defensive envelope. The impact isn't dramatic. No massive explosion, no towering flames, just a small warhead designed for precision rather than spectacle, punching through the radar array's housing and detonating inside the delicate electronic components within. Instantly, 23 kilometers of protected airspace becomes a dead zone. 6 minutes later, the pattern repeats at an S-400 site 41 kilometers to the east, then again at a communications relay station, then at a command bunker hidden beneath what appeared to be an abandoned farm. One by one, the pillars supporting Russia's electronic dome begin to crumble, not through brute force, but through surgical strikes guided by intelligence so complete that every weakness becomes a wound waiting to be opened. By 4:19 a.m., 17 defensive positions have gone silent. The survivors find themselves blind and isolated, their communications severed, their radar coverage reduced to scattered fragments of what once formed an impenetrable shield. Russian commanders realize they're not fighting an invasion. They're fighting something far worse. They're fighting their own defensive network turning against them, revealing their secrets to an enemy that seems to know their capabilities better than they know themselves. But the most terrifying revelation is yet to come. Because as the last radar station flickers offline, Ukrainian forces begin moving assets that have been waiting in the shadows. Assets that were never meant to face Russian air defenses. Assets that needed the electronic dome destroyed before they could complete their true mission. The drone swarms were not the main attack. They were simply clearing the way for something much larger. At 4:23 a.m., the true scope of Ukraine's strategy becomes clear. While Russian commanders scramble to understand how their defensive network collapsed so completely, seismic sensors buried along the Belarusian border begin registering vibrations, not the random tremors of industrial machinery or late-night freight traffic. These vibrations pulse with mechanical rhythm, growing stronger by the minute. Something massive is moving through the darkness, using roads that satellite imagery shows as empty farmland. The deception runs deeper than anyone imagined. For 3 months, Ukrainian engineering teams had been working under the cover of agricultural development projects, laying what appeared to be irrigation systems and soil monitoring networks across a 200-kilometer corridor. International observers, even Russian intelligence satellites, saw nothing more suspicious than tractors and farming equipment moving through fields that bordered the conflict zone. But beneath that mundane activity, a different kind of harvest was being prepared. The irrigation pipes were actually precision-manufactured launch tubes rated for 37 tons of pressure per square inch. The soil sensors were targeting computers disguised as weather monitoring equipment. The tractors were mobile command centers equipped with satellite uplinks and battlefield management systems that could coordinate attacks across multiple time zones. Ukraine hadn't just been planning a drone assault. They had been constructing a hidden weapons platform spanning 3 countries, disguised so perfectly that Russia never realized their northern border had been militarized. At 4:31 a.m., the first barrage launches. Not from Ukraine, but from positions that technically don't exist on any military map. 47 cruise missiles rise from concealed launchers embedded in what appears to be ordinary countryside, their flight paths already programmed to exploit the gaps created when the radar network died. Each missile carries a warhead designed not for maximum destruction, but for maximum psychological impact. Their targets aren't military installations or strategic infrastructure. They're the command centers where Russian leadership has been watching the electronic battle unfold. The missiles don't follow predictable ballistic trajectories. Instead, they hug the terrain like mechanical predators, following river valleys and forest corridors at altitudes so low their exhaust trails brush treetops. Their navigation systems don't rely on GPS signals that can be jammed or spoofed. They use terrain-following radar cross-referenced with three-dimensional maps, so detailed they can identify individual buildings from the shadows they cast in moonlight. Russian air traffic control centers begin receiving automated distress signals from aircraft that don't appear on any flight manifest. Commercial transponder codes broadcast from empty sky, creating the illusion of civilian airliners in distress across 12 different approach vectors. Emergency protocols activate automatically, forcing defensive systems to hold fire while rescue coordination centers scramble to locate aircraft that exist only as digital phantoms in computer networks. Under this umbrella of electronic chaos, the real strike force moves into position. 3 squadrons of Ukrainian fighter aircraft that have been hiding in hardened shelters for 6 weeks finally take to the skies. But these aren't the aging Soviet-era jets that Russian intelligence expected to face. These are aircraft that officially don't exist in Ukrainian inventory, flying with identification codes that trace back to maintenance records from countries that deny any involvement in the conflict. The lead pilot speaks into his radio with call signs that haven't been used since NATO exercises 3 years earlier. His wingmen respond with authentication codes that technically expired months ago. To anyone monitoring radio communications, they sound like ghost signals from operations that ended before this war began. But their weapons are devastatingly current. Air-to-ground missiles guided by targeting data collected during the drone reconnaissance phase, programmed to strike with accuracy measured in centimeters rather than meters. At 4:44 a.m., the first missile impacts a command bunker that Russian engineers claimed was invisible from the air. The facility had been carved into a hillside and covered with materials designed to absorb radar energy while mimicking the thermal signature of natural rock formations. Its ventilation systems drew air through underground tunnels that emerged 3 kilometers away, disguised as abandoned mining shafts. On satellite imagery, it appeared as nothing more than a geological feature that happened to have unusually regular drainage patterns. But Ukraine's targeting data came from human sources, not satellites. Intelligence operatives who had been living as agricultural workers, seasonal laborers, and traveling merchants for 18 months. People who noticed that certain hills had security cameras disguised as bird nests. Who observed that some farmhouses had underground power cables rated for far more electricity than any rural residents should need. Who counted the number of vehicles entering areas where no vehicles should logically go. The bunker's destruction isn't announced by explosions or collapsing concrete. Instead, communication networks across the region simply go quiet. Radio frequencies that carried encrypted command traffic fall silent. Data links between forward positions and rear command posts stop responding to authentication requests. Orders that should flow automatically through digital networks begin backing up in communication queues that no one is monitoring anymore. By dawn, the silence speaks louder than any explosion ever could. Russia's most advanced defensive network, built over decades and worth billions of rubles, reduced to scattered fragments of blind metal in less than an hour. Not by overwhelming force, but by patience, precision, and the quiet understanding that in modern warfare, the deadliest weapon isn't always the one that roars. It's the one that whispers. Ukraine proved that night that victory doesn't always announce itself with thunder. Sometimes it arrives on wings too small to see, carrying minds too clever to ignore. Tell me, when every screen goes dark and every radio falls silent, what separates a fortress from a tomb? Because after October 15th, that question haunted every radar operator who survived to ask it.